Welcome aboard the Midnight Caravan. Tonight, setting sail into the endless dark of the open sea, where the waves whisper secrets and not every passenger makes it back to shore. Each of the stories you'll hear tonight is true, dredged from the haunted corridors of cruise liners where luxury turned to terror. Before we cast off, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Drop it in the comments so I know who's sailing with us. And if these midnight voyages keep you glancing over your shoulder, subscribe and leave a like. There's a new tale waiting for you here every night when the clock strikes midnight. I was working security on the Emerald Crown when it happened. Third shift, midnight to dawn, the graveyard hours when most passengers were asleep, and the only people awake were gamblers, drunks, and crew like me trying not to nod off at the monitors. Security duty sounds glamorous, but in reality, it's watching endless loops of surveillance footage, hallways, stairwells, lounges, the decks. 90% of the time, the only crime you catch is a kid sneaking into a restricted area or someone trying to smoke where they shouldn't. That night started no different. My partner Collins was snoring in his chair, half a donut still clutched in his hand. I kept cycling through camera feeds, letting the static hum fill the silence. Then something caught my eye on deck 9. A lone passenger stood at the railing. That wasn't unusual. People liked late-night walks, staring at the waves. But this woman didn't move. She just stood there, gripping the rail, hair blowing across her face. I zoomed in. White nightgown, barefoot. Mid-30s, maybe. No ID lanyard, no shoes, no jacket, just staring out to sea. I frowned and checked the timestamp. 12:42 a.m. I switched to the next camera, different angle of the same deck. The railing was there, the waves crashed below, but the woman wasn't. I blinked, went back to the first feed. Still there. Back to the second feed. Gone. "Collins!" I hissed, nudging him awake. "You seeing this?" He wiped sugar from his mouth, groaned, and leaned in. I toggled between the cameras, pointing. "There, she's right there, but not here." He frowned. Probably a glitch, old cameras. But then the woman moved, slowly, deliberately. She climbed the railing. My stomach dropped. Oh, hell. I slammed the comm switch, calling to the deck patrol. "Deck 9, port side railing, possible jumper. Move now." Static. No reply. The woman stood balanced on the rail. Her hair whipped across her face, but she didn't brush it away. She turned her head slightly, just enough that I thought, for a second, she was looking right at the camera, right at me. Then she leaned forward and stepped into the dark. My heart stopped. I bolted from the security office, Collins stumbling after me. We raced up the stairwell, lungs burning, until we hit deck 9. The ocean wind slapped us in the face, cold and sharp. The deck was empty. No woman. No splash in the water. Nothing. We scanned the waves, calling into the night. Nothing but the endless black sea. Collins swore and grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, we've got a possible overboard. Deck 9, port side." The whole ship erupted into chaos after that. Searchlights swept the water, alarms blared, the captain's voice thundered over the intercom. Crew scrambled, passengers woke, confused and panicked. But there was no trace, no body, no ripple, not even clothing left behind. Hours later, when the search was called off, the official report went into the log. Probable suicide. But when I went back to the security office, something was waiting for me. The footage. The woman on the rail. Except this time, when I watched it back, she didn't step forward. She turned her head and smiled, directly into the camera. And in that grainy footage, just before the screen cut to static, I saw her lips move, forming words meant only for me. I replayed the footage a dozen times, squinting at the grainy pixels. Each time my stomach knotted tighter. The woman's smile wasn't casual. It was deliberate, wide, wrong. And her lips definitely moved. I couldn't hear the words, of course, No audio on the external cameras, but when I slowed the feed and focused, I could read them clear as day. "You're next." I yanked the monitor's plug from the wall, screen dying with a pop. Collins shot me a look. "Jesus, man, what's your problem?" "She spoke," I said, my voice cracked. "She looked right at me." He snorted. "Hallucination. You've been staring at those screens too long." He shoved another donut in his mouth and waved me off, but I couldn't let it go. Over the next 2 days, I barely slept. My shifts blurred into each other. Every time I switched through the camera feeds, I half expected to see her again, standing at the rail, smiling. Sometimes I swore I caught glimpses, a figure in white at the far end of a corridor, a pale face in a reflection. But when I rewound the footage, there was nothing there. On the third night, the call came in. Another missing passenger, a man this time. He'd been last seen heading for Deck 9 around midnight. His cabin was empty, bed untouched. His wife swore he was fine before he went for a walk. But the cameras? They showed him walking down the corridor, then stepping through a door that led to nowhere, literally nowhere. I checked the blueprints. That door was supposed to be sealed off during the last retrofit, permanently locked. But on the footage, it swung open like it had been used every day. The man walked through, disappeared into black. Collins shook his head. "System error. Glitched overlay." "Then where's the guy?" I snapped. He had no answer. That night, I patrolled Deck 9 myself. The sea air was sharp and salty, stinging my nose. The deck lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. I walked the length of the railing, forcing myself not to look down into the endless dark below. Halfway across, I froze. She was there, the woman in white, standing barefoot on the deck, her nightgown rippling in the wind. She leaned against the railing like she'd been waiting for me. My radio crackled, but when I reached for it, my hand locked stiff. I couldn't move. My breath came shallow, fogging in the cold air. She lifted a hand, beckoning. My legs twitched, moving without my permission. Step by step, I found myself walking toward her. My heart pounded, but the fear was drowned beneath something stronger, a pull, like a tide dragging me forward. "You're next." The words weren't in my head. They were in the air, carried by the wind. Clear as day. I reached the railing. She stood inches away now. Her eyes were bottomless, pupils blown wide, reflecting nothing. She smiled that same too wide smile, teeth too straight, too uniform, like they weren't meant for a human mouth. I gripped the railing, my knuckles white. My body leaned forward inch by inch until the black water yawned below. For a moment I wanted it, to step forward, to fall into the silence. Then something snapped. Collins's voice blared from my radio, loud and angry. "Report in, damn it! Where the hell are you?" The spell broke. I stumbled back, gasping. When I looked up, she was gone. Only the waves remained, crashing against the hull. But when I glanced down, I froze, because on the wet steel below the railing, there were 2 sets of bare footprints, one leading to the edge, and one leading back on board. I couldn't unsee those footprints. 2 sets, one vanishing into the sea and one returning. The woman hadn't drowned. She'd come back aboard. I tried reporting it. I showed the logs, the footage, anything I could scrape together. But the system malfunctioned again. The recording of her on the railing? Corrupted. The file with the missing man walking through that impossible door? Gone. My supervisors chalked it up to glitches. Collins told me I was losing it. But deep down I knew the truth. She wasn't a glitch. She was real. And she was choosing people. The next night, I sat in the security room alone. Collins had called in sick, though I wondered if he just didn't want to sit next to me anymore. The monitors flickered quietly in the dark, cycling through their endless feeds. At 12:43 a.m., she appeared again. Deck 9. The same spot. The same nightgown. Only this time she wasn't staring at the ocean. She was staring at the camera. At me. My throat went dry. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. Her lips moved again. I knew what she was saying without hearing it. Come now. I left the office. I don't remember deciding to. My legs just carried me, like a puppet on strings, down the stairwell to deck 9. The corridors blurred past, my ears filled with the sound of rushing water, even though I was still inside. When I stepped onto the deck, the wind slammed into me, salt sharp in my nose. She was waiting. Closer this time, right at the railing. Her skin shimmered in the deck lights, slick as if coated in seawater. Her eyes were black now, the whites gone completely. She tilted her head at me, smiling with those two perfect teeth. And beside her stood the missing man. He wasn't breathing. His lips were blue, his eyes vacant. But his body moved anyway, stiff and unnatural, like he was being steered by invisible strings. He turned his head toward me, his jaw cracking as it opened. She chose me, he whispered in a voice not his own. Now she chooses you. My knees buckled. I gripped the railing to stay upright, every nerve screaming to run. But she stepped closer, reaching out a hand, her nails long and sharp. Drops of seawater fell from her fingertips, hissing against the steel. I wanted to fight. God, I wanted to. But my body leaned forward, inch by inch, the pull overwhelming. The waves roared below, black and endless, promising silence. Then, Collins. His voice again, barking through my radio. "Report in! Where the hell are you?" The spell wavered. My vision blurred. I forced my body back, stumbling against the railing, ripping myself free of that impossible pull. Her smile faltered. Her hand dropped. And then, without warning, she turned. Not toward me, toward another passenger. A young girl, maybe 16, had wandered onto the deck. Probably couldn't sleep. She froze when she saw us. "No!" I shouted, lunging forward, but my legs were lead. The woman's smile widened again. She reached for the girl, moving faster than anything human. Before I could close the distance, the girl was at the rail, her eyes glazed. One step, then another, and she was gone. The splash never came. Just silence. I collapsed, screaming her name even though I didn't know it. Crew rushed onto the deck moments later, grabbing me, demanding answers. I tried to tell them, but the girl's parents arrived, screaming, clawing at the railing, begging us to bring her back. Official report? Suicide. But I know better. She chose the girl instead of me. I quit after that voyage. I'll never set foot on a ship again. But sometimes I still see her face, reflected in windows, standing at the edge of dark water. And I wonder if she's still choosing. If one night she'll come back for me. Or if she's already found someone else. If you've never worked galley duty on a cruise ship, let me paint you a picture. It's hell. The passengers are asleep, bellies full of lobster and champagne, while you're in the back, scraping grease from pans the size of bathtubs and washing dishes until your fingers prune and crack. The air is thick with steam and bleach, the floor always slick no matter how many times you mop it. Time blurs. You live in the hum of industrial dishwashers and the clang of pots. I'd been on the job 2 weeks when I noticed something strange. It was a Tuesday night, technically Wednesday morning, around 2 a.m. The galley was nearly empty. Most of the crew finished and gone. I lingered behind, headphones in, just trying to get ahead on my stack of trays. The dish line stretched down the corridor, endless racks of dirty plates clattering through the conveyor. That's when I saw them. At the far end of the kitchen, where the lights barely reached, a group of men worked the prep tables. They were fast, efficient, chopping, stirring, carrying trays. Too fast. Their movements were mechanical, perfectly in sync. I frowned, pulling out an earbud. "Hey, I called. My voice echoed through the galley. No response. I walked closer, wiping sweat from my brow. The steam hung heavy, distorting the space, making the fluorescent bulbs buzz like angry insects. The men kept working. One scraped a knife across a cutting board, another stirred a pot that wasn't on, another stacked trays that weren't there, and then I realized they weren't wearing uniforms, not the crisp whites we were issued. Their clothes were faded, threadbare, stained with something darker than sauce. I opened my mouth again, but the words stuck in my throat, because when one of them turned his head slightly, I saw his face, or what was left of it. Skin gray and shriveled, lips split wide, eyes dull and sunken like dried fish. He looked straight through me and kept working, knife scraping against the board in that steady, endless rhythm. My stomach dropped. I stumbled back, my boots slipping on the wet tile. The clatter echoed, and for the first time, the men froze. Slowly, in unison, their heads turned toward me. The room went silent. No steam hiss, no clatter, no hum of machines. Just that awful, suffocating silence. One of them opened his mouth. His jaw creaked, bone grinding, and words spilled out in a low, broken whisper. Still working. Another joined, their voices overlapping like static. Still working. Still working. Their hands never stopped moving. Chopping, stirring, scraping, even as they stared at me with those empty eyes. My heart thundered. I backed away, grabbing the edge of the dish line for balance. My hand brushed something wet, and I glanced down. Blood. The trays weren't covered in food scraps anymore. They were covered in flesh. Shredded, raw, dripping down the conveyor in thick streams. I gagged, stumbling back harder until my shoulders hit the swinging door. I shoved it open and spilled into the corridor. The lights out there buzzed normal, the hum of the ship returned. When I looked back, the galley was empty, no men, no blood. Just spotless counters and the faint echo of dripping water. I tried to convince myself it was exhaustion, a hallucination from too many double shifts. But the next night, when I walked in, the cutting boards were still wet, and there were fresh knife marks carved deep into the wood. The next night, I told myself I wouldn't stay late. I'd finish my shift, clock out, and get the hell away from the galley. But of course, things never work out that clean when you're on crew duty. A dishwasher jammed just before midnight, trays piling up faster than anyone could clear them. My supervisor barked at me to fix it since I was the youngest and, in his words, had the best back. So there I was, crouched on the tile floor, elbows deep in suds and metal parts, when I heard it again. The rhythm. Not the clatter of dishes this time, but the steady scrape of knives against boards. My stomach turned to stone. I hadn't even looked up yet, but I knew. They were back. I rose slowly, my knees slick with water. Sure enough, at the far end of the galley, the figures moved in sync, chopping, stirring, cleaning. Same faded uniforms, same gray faces, same lifeless eyes. I gripped the edge of the sink so hard my knuckles went white. Not real, I whispered to myself. Not real. Just tired. But then one of them looked up. His face was gaunt, cheekbones sharp under paper-thin skin. His lips split in a wet smile. Still working. The others echoed him, voices low and rasping. Still working. Still working. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped my wrench. I took a step back, and that's when I noticed something new. The counters weren't empty anymore. Trays lined the prep tables, piled high with slabs of raw meat. Except this wasn't beef or pork. The cuts were too human. Fingers curled against each other in bowls, ribs stacked like firewood, skin draped across trays like discarded tablecloths. I gagged, bile burning my throat. One of the dead crew reached for the nearest tray, scooping a piece of meat onto his cutting board. He raised his knife high and brought it down with a sickening chop. Another stirred a pot. the liquid inside dark red, bubbling thick and slow. The smell hit me then, iron, rot, something cloyingly sweet underneath. The stench of death boiled alive. I stumbled back toward the door, boots slipping on the slick floor. Their heads turned in unison again, eyes following me. "Join us," one rasped. His jaw creaked with every word. "Work," another whispered. "Always work." Their voices layered, overlapping until it became a chant. Still working, still working, still working. The galley lights flickered, plunging the room into brief darkness. When they came back, the figures were closer. No sound of footsteps, no movement I could track. They had just shifted. 10 feet gone in a blink. I panicked, grabbed the nearest thing, a tray lid, and hurled it across the room. It clanged against a prep table, scattering knives. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The chant stopped. All of them froze, heads tilted toward me. Then, in perfect unison, they took a single step forward. The lights flickered again. Another step. Water sloshed across the floor as if the drains had stopped working, the puddles growing deeper around my boots. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. I shoved through the swinging doors, sprinting down the corridor, not daring to look back. The lights in the hallway buzzed steady, the air normal, but when I reached the crew stairs, I realized my shoes were leaving wet prints behind. Water. Thick. Red. Not dishwater. Blood. And when I finally looked down at my hands, I saw that my fingers weren't just wet. They were slick with something that looked too much like raw meat. I scrubbed my hands raw under the crew sink that night. No matter how much soap I used, I swore I could still feel it. The tacky, greasy texture clinging to my skin, the faint smell of iron rising from my fingertips. My supervisor told me to go to bed, said I looked pale. I didn't argue, but I didn't sleep either. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. The dead crew, knives rising and falling, whispering in unison, still working, still working. The next evening, I thought about refusing to enter the galley. I almost did. But on a ship, you don't just refuse orders, you don't get a choice. If you don't show up, someone reports you, and you're done, fired at the next port, stranded without pay. So I went back. The galley looked normal at first, bright lights, clean counters, the dish line running smooth. A couple of other guys were scrubbing pans, chatting about football. I forced myself to breathe. Maybe it really had been exhaustion. Maybe I was cracking under the shifts. Then I noticed the cutting boards. They'd been replaced that morning, brand new, fresh plastic, no grooves or stains. But as I watched, knife marks began etching themselves into the surface, long, jagged gouges appearing one after another, as though invisible hands were carving them from below. I dropped the tray I was carrying. It clattered, plates shattering. The other crew looked at me, annoyed. "What's your problem, man?" one muttered. But they didn't see it. They didn't see the marks deepening, filling with something dark that spread across the board like veins. The chant began again, low, almost too faint to hear. "Still working." I spun. The other guys didn't react. They kept scrubbing, laughing, completely oblivious. My heart thundered. Either I was the only one who could hear it, or I was the only one it was meant for. The lights flickered, steam rose thicker from the dishwashers, curling like smoke, and through it, the dead crew appeared again. This time, they weren't at the far end of the galley, they were right beside me. One brushed past, his shoulder wet and cold against mine. Another leaned over the sink, chopping at nothing. Another stirred an empty pot, his head turning slowly toward me, jaw hanging loose. Their whispers filled my ears. "Join us. Always work. Never leave." I stumbled back, tripping over a bucket, slamming into the counter. None of the living crew reacted. They worked around me like I wasn't there, their laughter mixing with the whispers until I couldn't tell one from the other. One of the dead reached out. His fingers, skin peeled, bone jutting, brushed my arm. I screamed, shoving him away, but my hand passed straight through. Cold burned up my skin where he touched me, sinking deep into my veins. For a moment, I wasn't in the galley anymore. I was somewhere else. A kitchen, yes, but older. Rusted metal, wood swollen with seawater, the stench of rot so strong I gagged. Around me, dozens of figures chopped and stirred, skin sloughing from their bones, eyes hollow. They didn't look at me. They didn't have to. I already knew what I was. Another worker. I blinked, and I was back in the galley. Bright lights, stainless steel, my co-workers glaring like I'd lost my mind. My heart pounded. My chest ached. I ran. I don't remember leaving, just that I didn't stop until I locked myself in my cabin, shaking, drenched in sweat. I quit at the next port, packed my things, stepped off, never looked back. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm making dinner at home, I catch myself falling into a rhythm. Chop, scrape, stir. Over and over, my hands moving without thought, and in the hiss of the frying pan, I hear it. Still working. I don't know if I imagined it all. Maybe it was exhaustion, hallucinations, stress. But if that's true, why do my cutting boards at home still end up covered in knife marks I don't remember making? I never thought I'd be telling this story. To be honest, I've avoided even thinking about it for years. But every time I close my eyes, I see that number etched on a brass plate, faintly glinting in the dim hallway light. Cabin 617, a door that officially didn't exist. Back then, I was a junior steward on one of the big Caribbean liners. It wasn't glamorous, mostly changing sheets, vacuuming endless corridors, scrubbing toilets while smiling at passengers who never remembered your face. The kind of job where you worked long hours and got paid just enough to stay on board. But I didn't mind. I liked the sea. I liked the routine. That routine broke the night I got a complaint slip tucked under my door. It was late, maybe close to midnight. Passengers usually didn't bother filing complaints after hours, but the note was simple. Loud banging noises. Can't sleep. Cabin 6 ton of 15. I knew that deck well. Sixth deck cabins were tight, mid-priced, always filled with families who complained about everything. Too cold, too noisy, sheets too scratchy. But noise complaints were common, and usually it was nothing. Someone slamming a door, kids jumping on bunks. Still, I grabbed my keyring and flashlight and trudged down. The sixth deck hallway was quiet when I got there. The kind of muffled silence you only hear at sea, broken by the faint hum of engines below. I knocked on 615. A middle-aged woman cracked the door, her eyes bloodshot. "Do you hear it?" she whispered. At first, I didn't. Then faintly, I caught it. Thud, 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 like something striking a wall in steady rhythm. "It's been going for an hour," she said. "It's coming from next door." I nodded and stepped back. Next door was 6 to 17, except there wasn't supposed to be a 6 to 17. The manifest listed 615, 6 to 16, then skipped to 6 to 18. I'd cleaned those cabins myself. I knew the numbering by heart. But there it was. A door with tarnished brass numbers screwed into the wood. 6 to 17. I froze, staring at it. The woman rubbed her temples. "Please, just make it stop." I forced a smile and promised I'd check. My hands shook a little as I pulled my keys, flipping through them even though I knew none of them would fit. The ship didn't assign keys to non-existent rooms, but when I tried my master key, the one meant for emergency access, it slid in smooth, like it was meant to. The banging stopped. For a moment, I thought maybe it was over, that opening the lock had spooked whoever was inside. But as the tumblers clicked, I realized the sound hadn't stopped. It had just gone inside my head. My temples pulsed with each phantom thud. The door creaked open an inch. The air that drifted out was wrong. Not foul, not rotten, just wrong. Like the way hospital corridors smell at night, sterile but heavy with dread. I leaned closer, trying to catch a glimpse inside. Darkness. No furniture, no carpet, no glow from emergency lights. Just a vast, empty black. And then something tapped from inside the door. 3 sharp knocks, deliberate, right at eye level. I stumbled back, heart racing, as the door swung wider on its own. The woman from 615 gasped and shut her door with a slam, deadbolt clicking. I didn't blame her. I told myself to close it, to lock it again and walk away. But my feet carried me forward, one step at a time, until I was staring into that impossible dark. And somewhere inside, just past the threshold, I swore I saw someone standing, too tall to be a passenger, too still to be alive. I should have walked away, but the moment that figure tilted its head toward me, I knew it already had my attention, and it wasn't going to let me leave. I should have turned around right there, shut the door, reported it broken, and walked away like none of it ever happened. But my curiosity has always been stronger than my sense of self-preservation, and that night, it nearly destroyed me. I stepped into cabin 617. The temperature dropped instantly. My breath fogged, though we were in the middle of the Caribbean. The air pressed against me, thick and damp, like I had walked into the hold of a shipwreck rather than a cabin on a luxury liner. My flashlight beam cut through the dark, but the light seemed weaker here, swallowed by the shadows before it could touch the walls. Except, there weren't walls, not like there should have been. I expected the tight space of a cruise cabin, maybe a bunk, a desk, a little bathroom door. Instead, my light stretched into a corridor that ran far longer than the ship's blueprints allowed. Metal walls lined with rivets, the kind I hadn't seen outside of old shipyards. The floor creaked beneath my shoes, and every step echoed like I was walking inside a hollow hull. I called out, "Maintenance, hello?" The sound came back wrong, not as an echo, more like someone repeated it a second after me, a half-tone lower, mocking. "Maintenance, hello?" I froze, my flashlight trembling in my grip. The beam hit a wet streak along the metal wall. It looked like condensation at first, but when I reached out and touched it, my fingers came back red. Blood. Still warm. I staggered back, wiped my hand on my uniform, trying to convince myself it was paint or rust. Ships rust all the time, right? But the metallic smell on my fingertips told the truth. That's when I heard footsteps. Not behind me, up ahead, deeper in the corridor. Heavy, deliberate steps, like boots striking metal. They grew closer, echoing through the space. I pressed myself against the wall, flashlight beam shaking. "Who's there?" My voice cracked. The steps stopped. Silence swallowed the space. Even the ship's usual hum, the engines, the ventilation, was gone. All I could hear was my own breath rasping too loud in my chest. Then faintly, a voice. A man's voice, low and muffled, as if speaking through water. "Not supposed to be here." Every instinct screamed at me to leave. I turned and ran for the doorway, but the corridor stretched longer than before. The exit was just a speck of light, retreating with every step I took. The harder I ran, the farther it seemed. Something slammed against the wall beside me, hard enough to rattle my bones. I jerked my light toward the sound. Nothing. Just dents forming in the metal, one after another. Like invisible fists pounding from the other side. I sprinted, heart hammering, until finally the doorway loomed close enough to dive through. I stumbled out, gasping, into the familiar hallway of Deck 6. The door slammed behind me with a metallic clang. I turned to lock it, but the numbers were gone. No 617, just smooth wood, seamless, like there had never been a door there at all. I stood frozen, staring, until the woman from 615 cracked her door open again. "You stopped it," she whispered, relief flooding her face. "Thank you." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My hands still shook, my mind racing with what I'd just seen. But the worst part wasn't the corridor, or the blood, or the voice. The worst part was the wet footprints that trailed out from where the door had been. Footprints that weren't mine, leading farther down the hallway. And as I followed those prints with my eyes, I realized they weren't stopping at the carpet. They were headed straight for the passenger cabins. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I just sat on my bunk, staring at the dark corners of my cabin, waiting for footsteps that never came. By morning, I convinced myself it had been exhaustion, stress, maybe even some kind of hallucination. The human brain does strange things on little sleep. But when I reported for duty, the first thing I noticed were the rumors spreading among the staff. A child had gone missing overnight. A boy, maybe 7 or 8. His parents swore he'd been asleep in their cabin, but by morning his bed was empty, sheets cold. Security locked down the decks, interviewed passengers, but no one saw anything. I remembered the footprints, small, wet, leading toward the passenger cabins. I kept my mouth shut. All day I avoided Deck 6. I cleaned bathrooms, changed linens, smiled for passengers. I kept telling myself I wouldn't go back down there, that I'd forget it. But by nightfall, I found myself standing in front of where 6 to 17 had been. The wall was smooth, just as it had been that morning. No seam, no doorknob, nothing but wallpaper and wood paneling. I pressed my ear against it. At first, silence, then faint, steady thuds. The same pounding I'd heard before. I jerked back, but the sound didn't stop. Louder now, like fists hammering on the other side, desperate to get out. I looked up and down the hallway, empty. Passengers asleep, crew busy elsewhere. My hands shook as I pressed the master key against the wood, even though there was no lock. I don't know why I did it. Maybe I thought if I opened it again I could prove to myself it wasn't real. The wood gave way, seamless paneling splitting like a mouth opening, and there it was. Cabin 617 door wide, darkness yawning. This time I didn't hesitate. I stepped inside, flashlight ready, determined to see the truth. The corridor stretched again, longer than before, riveted metal walls slick with moisture. My beam swept across stains, dark handprints smeared across the walls, too high to belong to the missing boy. The voice came again, closer, louder. Not supposed to be here. I gripped my flashlight tighter, forcing my legs to move forward. The air grew thicker, pressing against my chest, each breath a struggle. The corridor bent, turned corners that shouldn't exist inside a ship, and then I saw him. The boy. Standing barefoot in the middle of the passage. His pajamas were soaked, clinging to him like he'd just climbed out of the sea. His head tilted at an unnatural angle, his eyes wide and glassy. "Go back," he whispered, but his lips didn't move. The voice came from everywhere at once. I reached out, but before I could touch him, something shifted in the dark behind him. A figure, too tall, too thin, its face hidden in shadow. Limbs bending wrong, scraping against the walls as it stepped forward. The boy didn't flinch. He just turned and began walking deeper into the corridor, into the black. And the figure followed. I ran. I didn't care about the truth anymore. I bolted for the door, lungs burning, heart hammering. The corridor stretched, twisted, but somehow I stumbled out into the hallway again. The door slammed shut behind me, vanishing into smooth wood once more. For a long moment, I just stood there, gasping, drenched in sweat. The hallway lights flickered. From behind me, in the silence, came 3 sharp knocks. I spun, but the wall was bare. I wanted to scream, to run, to wake the entire ship, but then I realized something that froze my blood cold. The door might be gone, but the wet footprints had returned, fresh ones this time, leading away from where 6 to 17 should have been, heading not toward the passenger cabins, but toward mine. I transferred off that ship after the voyage, never went back to sea. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear the faint pounding on my apartment wall. 3 knocks, always 3, and when I follow the trail of wet footprints, they always stop at my bedroom door. Working the kids' program on a cruise ship sounds like fun, right? Games, crafts, movie nights. It's basically babysitting with a nicer uniform. But what no one tells you is how draining it gets. Dozens of kids running wild, parents vanishing for cocktails, and you're left holding the chaos together with duct tape and smiles. I'd been doing it for 3 seasons, and I thought I'd seen it all. Tantrums, food fights, even one kid who locked himself in a lifeboat for adventure. But nothing prepared me for her. She first showed up on day 2 of the cruise. I was running sign-in, checking names against the roster, when she walked through the door. A little girl, maybe 7, brown hair cut short, wearing a faded yellow dress that looked like it had been washed too many times. She didn't smile, she didn't say a word, just walked in and sat at the coloring table. I glanced down at the roster. No yellow dress, no name that matched her face. "Sweetie, what's your name?" I asked. She looked up at me with the flattest, darkest eyes I've ever seen on a child and said, "They forgot." I frowned. Forgot what? But she turned back to her paper and began coloring. I figured maybe she'd slipped in with another family. Happens all the time. Parents sign one kid in and another sneaks along. I decided I'd sort it out later, except she came back the next day, and the day after. Every time she signed herself in, except she never wrote anything, just pressed the pen against the paper until it tore. When parents came to pick up their kids, no one ever claimed her. I asked around. No one knew who she belonged to. Even the other kids didn't seem to notice her, like she was part of the furniture. But I noticed. One afternoon, during hide-and-seek, I found her crouched in the supply closet. She wasn't hiding. She was facing the wall, whispering. I leaned in. "Hey, game's over." She didn't move, didn't even flinch. Her whispers spilled out faster, and though I couldn't catch all of it, one phrase froze my blood. "They'll forget you too." That night, I double-checked the passenger manifest. Page by page, cabin by cabin. She wasn't on it. No name, no family, nothing. The next morning, I asked my coworkers if they'd noticed her. Sarah, the assistant coordinator, gave me a confused look. "What girl?" she asked. "The one in the yellow dress, brown hair, about 7. Her smile faltered. "You okay? You look pale." I laughed it off, but my stomach was churning. When the kids came in that day, I scanned each face, praying she wouldn't be there. For a while, she wasn't. Crafts went normal, snack time came and went, and I let myself relax. Then I looked up during movie time. She was in the back row, alone. Her paper cup of juice sat untouched in her lap, her eyes locked on mine, and for the first time she smiled. Her teeth were too sharp. I wanted to run, but when I blinked, half the kids were gone, and the ones left behind were staring at me with those same black eyes. I blinked hard, rubbed my eyes, and for a moment, I thought I'd lost my mind. The movie still played on the projector screen, some cheerful cartoon with animals singing, but half the seats were empty. Gone. No sound of kids leaving. No shuffle of sneakers, no creak of the door. Just gone. The girl in the yellow dress sat perfectly still, juice cup in her lap. Her smile lingered, too wide, too sharp. The other kids left in the room weren't watching the movie anymore. They weren't even moving, just staring at me, their pupils so dark they looked like holes burned through their faces. "All right, that's enough," I stammered, forcing my voice into a cheerful tone. "Game's over, everybody back to the tables." No one moved. The air in the room thickened, heavy with a damp smell, like mildew and seawater. My throat tightened. Sweat prickled my neck. I stepped closer to the girl. "Sweetie, where's your family? Who brought you here?" She tilted her head, smile fading. "They forgot." Forgot what? She blinked, and in that blink, the missing kids were back. Just like that, seats filled, laughter bubbling, juice boxes slurped. Normal. Like nothing had happened. I stood frozen, staring. Had I imagined it? A hallucination? Too many hours, too little sleep? Sarah poked her head in. "Hey, everything okay?" I nearly screamed. "Yeah," I croaked, trying to sound casual. "Just kids being kids." She gave me a look, then shrugged and left. When I turned back, the girl was gone. That night, I couldn't shake it. I barely slept, tossing in my bunk, every creak of the ship making me jolt awake. My dreams were worse. Hallways filled with children whispering, small hands tugging at me, that yellow dress always vanishing just around the corner. By morning, I convinced myself I was sick, feverish, delirious. I even considered reporting myself to medical, but when I walked into the kids' center, my blood froze. She was already there, sitting at the table, coloring. I didn't even see her come in. I walked over, heart thudding, crouched low to meet her eyes. "What's your name?" I whispered. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she leaned in close. So close I felt her cold breath on my ear. "They forgot me," she said. "Now they'll forget you too." My skin crawled. I jerked back, knocking over a chair. The kids giggled, oblivious, and I forced a smile like nothing had happened. The rest of the day blurred. Games, crafts, movie time. She never moved far from me. Always in the corner of my vision, always watching. When parents came to pick up their children, I made a point of hanging back. I wanted to see who claimed her. One by one, kids ran into their parents' arms. The room emptied. My roster checked out clean. But she stayed, sitting alone. "Where are your parents?" I asked. My voice trembling. She smiled again. "You'll forget." "I won't forget you," I said before I could stop myself. Her grin widened, and for the first time I saw something in her eyes. Relief, like she'd been waiting for me to say that. The lights flickered, just for a second. When they steadied, the girl was gone, and so was Sarah. I ran into the hall, shouting her name, but no one answered. Crew passed me by without even blinking, like they didn't know who I was talking about. By dinner, I realized something terrifying. No one remembered Sarah. Not her name, not her face, not that she'd ever worked with us. She'd been erased. And when I checked the roster that night, my own name was already fading, letters smudged, as if I was being erased next. The roster shouldn't have looked like that. The pages were crisp, the ink clear on every other name. But mine, my name, was smudged as if someone had taken a wet thumb and dragged it across the letters. I rubbed at it, desperate to prove it was just a stain. But the more I touched it, the more the ink dissolved, until all that remained was a faint gray shadow where my name had been. When I asked my supervisor about it the next morning, he frowned. "You're not on this list," he said flatly. I laughed nervously. "Of course I am. I've been here 3 seasons. He stared at me blankly. "What's your name again?" The blood drained from my face. I walked out of that office in a daze. Crew I'd worked with for months brushed past without a second glance, no greetings, no nods, like I was invisible. By afternoon, I wasn't assigned anywhere. No tasks, no children handed to me. It was like the ship had already decided I wasn't part of it anymore. But she was. The girl in the yellow dress. I saw her everywhere, on the stairwell, by the pool, in the corner of the dining hall. No one else reacted. Kids brushed right past her, adults walked straight through. But she always looked at me, always smiling. That evening, I returned to the kids' center, though no one had asked me to. The door creaked open, and the smell hit me immediately, damp, like seawater soaking old carpet. She sat at the coloring table again, alone. Crayons scattered around her like offerings. "You understand now," she said without looking up. "What are you?" My voice cracked. Her crayon stilled. She lifted her eyes, black and endless. I was forgotten. By who? Her lips curved into that too-sharp smile. By everyone. The lights flickered. When they steadied, the room was full. Dozens of children, sitting cross-legged on the floor, silent, their eyes black, their mouths smiling. I recognized some of them, faces from old photos on the staff bulletin board, names whispered once about kids who had gone missing at sea. I backed toward the door, but it had vanished, just a blank wall where it had been. The girl stood, the others followed. Small hands lifted in unison, pointing at me. "You'll stay with us," she whispered, "until someone else takes your place." I pressed against the wall, heart slamming. No, I won't forget who I am. I won't. But even as I said it, I realized I couldn't remember my last name, or my hometown, or even why I'd signed up for this job. My mind blurred, slipping like sand through my fingers. The children stepped closer. Their whispers grew louder, overlapping until it was a chant. Forgotten, forgotten, forgotten. I screamed, but the sound didn't matter. The ship wouldn't remember me. The crew wouldn't. The parents wouldn't. I was already gone. The next morning, a new coordinator took my place. Bright smile, crisp uniform, clipboard in hand. No one mentioned me. No one noticed I was gone. Except the girl. She sat quietly at the back of the room, coloring with her broken crayons, waiting. And when the new coordinator glanced her way, I saw the recognition in her eyes, the first spark of fear. The cycle had started again. If you're ever on a cruise and your child wanders off and no one seems to remember they existed, walk away. Don't search. Don't ask questions. Because once you see the girl in the yellow dress, she'll make sure you join her too. Every cruise starts the same way, with a lifeboat drill. They call it mandatory, but everyone treats it like a joke, standing around in bulky life jackets, sweating under the sun, waiting for the staff to finish their speeches. I'd been on cruises before, so I knew the drill by heart. Muster station, life jacket, follow instructions. Simple. But this time, it wasn't. We'd boarded the Aurora Dawn 2 days out of Miami. The first night was perfect. Open bar, poolside band, dancing until midnight. By morning, the announcement came. Lifeboat drill in 1 hour. All passengers report to assigned muster stations. Grumbling, we all lined up on deck 5, rows of orange vests glowing like traffic cones. Crew members stood at intervals, their faces stiff, movements rehearsed. They always looked bored during these things, except this time, they didn't. They looked eager. I noticed it first in their smiles. Too wide, too sharp, plastered on like masks. Their eyes never blinked. One by one, they walked the line, checking jackets, their fingers lingering too long on the straps, their gazes darting toward the sea. I whispered to the man next to me, "Creepy, huh?" He chuckled nervously. Yeah, like they're auditioning for a horror movie. The drill began. A woman in a pressed uniform stepped forward with a megaphone. Her voice boomed across the deck. "Welcome, passengers. Today you will learn what to do when the sea calls you." I frowned. That wasn't the script. A few passengers laughed, assuming it was some kind of joke. But the crew didn't laugh. Their smiles stretched wider. The woman continued. "When the waters rise, you must not resist. You must follow. The lifeboats will take you where you belong." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. People exchanged uneasy looks. I glanced at the ocean. Calm, endless, black-blue under the cloudy sky. The crew began moving, not guiding us gently, but hurting us. Hands pressed against our backs, shoving us toward the lifeboats. I stumbled forward, heart thudding. This wasn't right. A woman protested, "Excuse me, what are you—" Her words cut off in a scream as 2 crew members lifted her by the arms and carried her toward the railing. She thrashed, kicked, but their faces never changed. That same glassy-eyed smile. The crowd panicked, shouts, pushing, people trying to run. But more crew appeared, blocking every exit. I ducked low, pulling my hood over my face, trying to disappear in the chaos. My pulse roared in my ears. The woman with the megaphone raised her arms, her voice ringing out above the screams. "The sea has waited. Tonight it will feed." I shoved through the crowd, desperate for an opening. My life jacket bounced against my chest, straps tangling my arms. The lifeboats loomed ahead, swinging in their davits, ropes creaking. One crewman caught my wrist. His grip was cold, stronger than it should have been. He leaned close, his teeth too straight, too uniform. "You'll be safe," he whispered. "The sea takes care of its own." I ripped free, elbowing him hard, and bolted. My breath came in ragged gasps, my vision swimming. Everywhere I looked, passengers were being forced toward the rails, shoved, screaming, into the dark water below. But when I reached the lifeboats, I froze. They weren't empty. Figures already sat inside, pale and dripping, their eyes black pits, their mouths stretched into silent smiles, waiting. I wanted to scream, but when one of them lifted a hand in greeting, fingers swollen, skin peeling, I realized the lifeboats weren't meant to save us. They were meant to deliver us. The lifeboats should have been reassuring, bright orange, bobbing steady on their ropes, symbols of safety. But staring into them that night, I felt my stomach twist. The passengers inside weren't passengers at all. Their clothes hung in tatters, skin waterlogged, lips stretched into frozen smiles, drops of seawater slid down their faces like tears. One raised its hand again, beckoning me forward. My knees nearly buckled. I spun, desperate for an exit. But the deck was chaos. Crew members herded passengers like cattle, dragging them to the rails, forcing them into lifeboats that swung heavily against the hull. People screamed, begged, fought. Some tried to rush back inside, but the doors were sealed, crew blocking every entrance, their glassy eyes unblinking. The woman with the megaphone's voice cut through the storm of panic. "Do not resist. The sea has chosen you." I ducked behind a row of life jackets, heart pounding. My breath came fast, shallow, too loud in my ears. I needed a plan, a gap, something. A man stumbled past me, his vest half unbuckled. Before I could stop him, two crewmen seized his arms and dragged him toward the lifeboats. He screamed, twisting, kicking. His eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, wide with terror. Then he was shoved inside. The figures in the boat reached for him. Dozens of pale hands pulling, clutching, dragging him down. His screams cut off like a switch had been flipped. The lifeboat rocked, then stilled. The figures smiled. I swallowed hard, bile rising. My whole body shook. "Don't look at them," a voice whispered beside me. I nearly jumped out of my skin. A young woman crouched next to me, hair plastered to her face with sweat. Her life jacket hung loose around her neck. "They notice if you look too long," she hissed. I stared at her, unable to speak. She nodded toward the service stairwell at the far end of the deck. "We go now, or we're done." We crept low, moving with the flow of terrified passengers. Crew eyes scanned the crowd, smiles fixed, but their gazes slid past us. For a moment I thought it might work. Then a voice boomed behind me. "You!" I froze. One of the crew pointed directly at me, smile stretching wider, teeth too straight, too uniform. "You're ready." The crowd parted as he strode toward me. My blood turned to ice. The young woman grabbed my arm, yanking hard. "Run!" We bolted. The crewman's footsteps pounded after us, heavier than human, echoing across the deck. My lungs burned, every stride a prayer. We hit the stairwell, slammed the door shut behind us, and stumbled down into the dark. The air below was damp, suffocating. Pipes rattled overhead, the hum of the engines echoing like a heartbeat. My chest heaved, sweat stinging my eyes. The young woman pressed a finger to her lips. "They'll hear us." We crouched in the shadows, straining to listen. Above, the screams continued, voices rising, then cutting off one by one. The hymn of the sea swelled louder, carried through the walls. "Join us! Join us!" The stairwell door rattled. I held my breath. The handle turned once, twice, then stopped. Silence. For a moment I thought we were safe. Then the pipes above groaned, dripping water onto my face, and in the ripple of each drop, I saw pale hands reaching. The woman grabbed my arm again, whispering, "They already know where we are." And when I looked back up the stairwell, the smiling crew were waiting at the top. They stood at the top of the stairwell, silhouettes framed in flickering light. Smiles too wide, eyes too black. One by one, their heads tilted in perfect unison. The young woman beside me gripped my arm so tight her nails dug through my sleeve. "We have to move." We scrambled downward, boots slamming metal steps. The voices followed, soft at first, then swelling until the stairwell itself seemed to vibrate. "Join us, join us, join us." We burst into the lower corridor, water already sloshing across the floor. The ship groaned, tilting under our feet. Lights flickered above, bathing the hall in sickly yellow. "Engine room!" she shouted. "There's an emergency exit hatch!" I didn't argue. We ran, slipping in the rising water, the hymn echoing behind us. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but fear drove me forward. When we reached the engine room, the sight stopped me cold. Crew stood shoulder to shoulder among the machinery, their vests glowing orange, their smiles never wavering. But these weren't passengers anymore. Their skin sagged, bloated, water dripping from their mouths. Their eyes reflected the emergency lights like black mirrors. The young woman cursed under her breath. "No way through." The figures turned their heads toward us in perfect synchronization. Then they moved. We ran. Past dripping pipes, past groaning bulkheads, past rooms that shouldn't have existed. Every door we opened led deeper, not out. Corridors looped back on themselves. The ship wasn't a ship anymore. It was a maze. The hymn grew louder, pressing against my skull. I stumbled, clutching my ears. The young woman dragged me along, her grip iron. "Stay with me. Don't listen." But it was too late. I could hear words forming inside the song now. Promises, safety, belonging. And then, her scream. I spun. Hands had erupted from the water, pooling at our feet, pale and bloated, clutching her ankles. They pulled with inhuman strength, dragging her down. She kicked, thrashed, clawed at the walls, but the water swallowed her waist, her chest, her shoulders. "Help me!" she screamed, eyes wide with terror. I lunged forward, grabbing her hands, pulling with everything I had. My muscles burned, veins straining, but the water dragged harder. Her nails dug into my skin, desperate. "Don't let go," she sobbed. I didn't want to. God, I didn't want to. But something pulled from below with impossible force, yanking her down inch by inch. The hymn swelled, drowning out her screams. Her grip slipped. For a second, her face broke through the surface, eyes wild, mouth open in one final scream. Then she was gone. The water rippled once, then stilled. I fell back against the wall, gasping, shaking, her blood still warm on my hands. The corridor was empty now, silent, but the hymn didn't stop. I ran. Alone now, through endless halls, until I burst topside again. The deck was deserted. Lifeboats swung empty, ropes creaking. The ocean stretched black and endless. I staggered to the railing, lungs burning, and looked down. They were all there, passengers, crew, the young woman, floating in the waves. Pale faces turned upward, mouths smiling, whispering the same words over and over. "Join us! Join us! Join us!" My knees buckled. I wanted to jump, to end the pull, to belong. My body leaned forward, but then the ship shuddered, snapping me back. I stumbled away from the railing, choking on sobs. I survived. I don't know how. Rescue came days later, though no one could explain why the ship was nearly empty or why the lifeboats hung full but unused. I try not to think about her, about the way her nails dug into my skin before the sea claimed her. But every night I dream of that drill, the smiling faces, the hymn. And I know the truth. The sea doesn't take everyone. It only takes enough to remember. I should have listened to the older guys when they told me never to wander alone below Deck 3. At the time, I thought it was just crew hazing. Every ship has ghost stories, right? But now I know they weren't joking. If anything, they were trying to save me. It was my first week working as a junior engine technician on a mid-sized cruise liner. I'd been desperate for the job, steady pay, free meals, the chance to see the world without paying for a ticket. Most of my shifts were spent in the belly of the ship, where the air tasted like oil and metal, and the only light came from buzzing fluorescents and the red glow of warning panels. The noise down there was constant, humming turbines, pipes rattling, fans whining. You got used to it. After a while, silence became more unnerving than the racket. That's why when I heard a rhythmic clank echoing through one of the service corridors, I noticed it immediately. At first, I figured it was just a loose valve or a pipe expanding from heat. Routine stuff. But when I followed the sound, it didn't match the layout I knew. The corridor bent in ways it shouldn't, leading me deeper toward a section of the ship that, according to the blueprints, didn't exist. The air grew heavier the farther I went. The smell changed too, less like oil, more like wet copper, a rust and blood tang that clung to my throat. I reached a door I'd never seen before. Thick steel, flaking paint, with a number stenciled across the front, B14. We didn't have a B14. The engine rooms were numbered differently, and none of them were sealed off like this. I should have walked away, reported it. But curiosity won. I pulled my key ring, but none of them fit the heavy padlock, so I bent down, put my ear to the door. That's when I heard it. Breathing. Slow. Wet. On the other side. I froze, my pulse spiking. My first thought was stowaway, but the sound was wrong. Too deep, too rattling. Like someone trying to breathe through water. And then it spoke. A voice, distorted and low, sliding through the crack between the door and the frame. Let me out. I stumbled back so fast I smacked into the opposite wall. My flashlight slipped from my hand, rolling across the deck. The beam angled under the door for a split second, and that's when I saw it. Fingers. Pale, swollen, pushing under the gap. Too long, knuckles bending at impossible angles. They groped blindly across the floor before retreating again. My stomach lurched. Every rational part of me screamed to run, but instead, I picked up my light, hand trembling, and shone it over the door again. Scratches marred the steel, deep gouges that weren't made by tools or machines. They looked like claw marks, raked from the inside. Some fresh, some older, layered over each other in a frenzy. The voice came again, louder. Let me out! The padlock rattled, shaking against the latch as something yanked from inside. The entire door groaned, metal straining. I swear I felt the floor vibrate under my boots. I backed away, heart hammering, until I was halfway down the corridor. The sounds stopped. Just silence now. I wanted to believe I'd imagined it. First week nerves, stress, the hum of the ship playing tricks on my ears. But when I glanced back one last time, I saw something that destroyed that hope. The padlock wasn't shaking anymore. It was hanging open. And as I watched, the heavy steel door began to inch outward, pushed by something that should never have been trapped inside. The door opened with a groan that echoed through the service corridor like the hull of the ship itself was in pain. My breath caught in my throat as the gap widened, inch by inch, until the black inside seemed to spill into the hallway. I didn't wait to see more. I ran. My boots pounded the grated floor, each step clanging like gunshots. The air seemed to thicken around me, slowing me down, but fear pushed me forward. When I reached the main engine room, I nearly collapsed against the railing. The turbines roared, steady and mechanical, like a heartbeat too loud to ignore. For a moment, the normal noise grounded me. Maybe I had imagined the voice. Maybe the door had just shifted from pressure changes. Ships groan all the time. That's when the lights flickered. Not just one bulb, every fluorescent tube overhead sputtered in unison. For half a second, the whole engine room went black. And in that instant, I saw it. A shape, lurking between the machinery, tall, hulking. Its skin wet and glistening like it had just climbed from the ocean. The glow returned before I could focus, and the space was empty again. I staggered back, gripping the railing. My chest burned, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. "New kid," someone called. I spun to see one of the senior techs, a stocky guy named Morales, glaring at me from across the catwalk. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I almost laughed at that. If only it had been a ghost. I wanted to tell him everything, the corridor, the door, the voice. But I hesitated. What would I even say? That I'd found a room on the ship that shouldn't exist. That something inside begged me to let it out? I'd sound insane. Or worse, they'd think I'd been drinking on shift, and I'd be thrown off at the next port. So I just nodded and muttered, "Just tired." He didn't look convinced. But before he could press further, the alarm klaxons blared. Not the fire alarm, not the man overboard signal. This was the hull breach alarm. My blood went cold. Morales cursed and bolted for the control panel. I followed, my legs still shaking. The readout flickered. Minor breach detected. Deck B, right near where I had been. "Seal the section," Morales barked. We scrambled, flipping switches, diverting bulkheads. The system clanged as doors sealed across the lower decks. For a second, I thought maybe that would be it. Problem solved. Then the ship shuddered. Hard. The turbines roared, straining against something. The whole room tilted like a giant hand had pushed us from the side. I grabbed the railing, knuckles white, as Morales swore under his breath. "What the hell was that?" I shouted. He shook his head. "Not a breach. Something hit us." The alarm screamed louder. A red light flashed across the console. Unsealed entry detected. Morales froze. "That's impossible. We locked it down." But I knew exactly which door hadn't sealed. B-14. The overhead lights flickered again. The turbines groaned as though choking. The smell of salt water filled the room, sharp and suffocating. And then came the footsteps. Not human footsteps. Too heavy, too wet, slapping against the deck. They echoed through the corridors leading into the engine room. Morales grabbed a wrench from the tool rack, knuckles white. I backed toward the exit, flashlight in hand, heart jackhammering in my chest. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was just beyond the hatchway. And then, silence. We waited, holding our breath. The hatch handle began to turn, and when the hatch creaked open, dripping seawater onto the steel floor, I realized whatever had been locked in B-14 was now free, and it knew exactly where I was. The hatch swung open with a metallic screech, and seawater splashed onto the floor in a widening puddle. My stomach turned as the smell hit me, a brine stink so strong it burned my throat. Morales lifted the wrench like it was a sword, his jaw tight. The thing stepped through. At first I thought it was a man, a tall, broad-shouldered man dripping wet, clothes clinging to his skin. But then it lifted its head, and I realized there was nothing human about it. Its eyes were white, bulging, fish-like, with no pupils. Gills fluttered where its neck should have been, opening and closing with a wet rasp. Its lips peeled back to reveal a mouth full of jagged teeth that didn't quite fit together, like they'd been forced into a shape not meant for this world. It stared at me, not Morales, me. The hatch slammed shut behind it. "Run!" Morales shouted, charging with the wrench. The creature moved faster than I thought possible. Its hand shot out, catching Morales mid-swing. Bones cracked like twigs under its grip. Morales screamed, and the sound echoed through the engine room until it cut off abruptly. The creature let him drop, limp, like he weighed nothing. My flashlight beam shook across the steel, catching its skin, scaly in patches, raw and pale in others, like it was still changing. It turned toward me. I bolted across the catwalk, weaving between turbines, lungs on fire. Behind me, the sound of wet footsteps slapping the deck grew louder, closing in. My boots slipped on the water slicking the floor, nearly sending me over the railing. I ducked into a maintenance tunnel, slamming the hatch behind me, locking it with trembling hands. The corridor beyond was narrow, pipes hissing overhead, steam burning my face. I crawled forward, scraping my arms on the steel. The pounding started. The creature slammed against the hatch, the entire tunnel vibrating with each impact. Dust rained down, bolts rattling loose. I knew it wouldn't hold long. Up ahead, a grate led to the cooling vents. I yanked it open, crawling inside. The air was suffocatingly hot, but I dragged myself deeper, ignoring the burns on my skin. Behind me, the hatch gave way with a screech. The creature's breathing filled the tunnel. Wet, ragged, hungry. I crawled faster, my vision swimming. Ahead, the vent split into two paths. I chose left, praying it would lead somewhere safe. The heat pressed against me, searing my lungs, but I kept going. Then I saw it, a hatch to the cooling discharge chute. It vented straight into the ocean. I had one choice. I kicked the hatch until it broke free, the roar of the ocean filling my ears. Salt spray blasted my face. The creature's hand swiped just behind me, claws grazing my boot as I shoved myself out into the night. I plummeted into the black water, the shock of cold slamming into me like a wall. For a moment, I didn't know which way was up. My chest screamed for air. Then, faintly, I saw the glow of deck lights above and kicked hard, lungs burning. I surfaced, gasping, as alarms blared across the ship. Crew shouted from the railing, throwing ropes down. Strong hands hauled me up, dripping, half-conscious. The first thing I asked was, "Did it follow?" They gave me blank stares. One muttered that Morales had been crushed by machinery. "Accident," they said. "Freak malfunction." But I knew the truth. Whatever had been in B-14 was gone, and I had been the one to set it free. They never found it again, and maybe that's a victory. Maybe it drowned when I vented it into the sea, but some nights, when I stand near the shore, I swear I hear it breathing beneath the waves, patient and waiting. I survived. Morales didn't. And the ocean? The ocean remembers what I did. I worked communications on the Silver Meridian. My job wasn't glamorous. No captain's hats or bridge commands. I sat in a little room, the walls lined with switches and dials, announcing bingo nights and buffet hours over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, the buffet on Deck 6 will remain open until 10. Don't forget karaoke in the main lounge." That was my voice, my job, mundane, boring, safe. Until the night the voices started answering back. It was after midnight. Most of the ship was asleep. I was running a test, routine stuff, making sure the lines were clear. The PA crackled in my headset as I spoke into the mic. "Test. 1, 2, 3. All stations clear." I waited for silence. Instead, I heard it. "Clear." Not my voice. It was faint, low, as though whispered through water. I sat up straight, scanning the meters. No other channels open. No one else broadcasting. The line was clean. I tried again. "Test. All stations clear." This time, the voice came louder. "All stations clear." My chest tightened. The tone was off, slower, heavier, like someone repeating me a few seconds behind. I cut the mic and leaned back, rubbing my eyes. Exhaustion, I thought. Just echo in the line. Then the PA system crackled again, unprompted. "Ladies and gentlemen." My stomach dropped. It was my voice. but I hadn't spoken. The sea will welcome you shortly. I yanked the headset off, heart hammering. The meters spiked, then flatlined. Silence. I told myself it was interference, maybe a crossed signal. Ships run a dozen channels, crew chatter, engineering, navigation. Signals bleed sometimes. That's all it was, or so I hoped. The next day, I kept one ear tuned to the system as usual. Everything normal. Announcements went through fine. Passengers went about their day. But around dusk, the static started again. Deck 6. All passengers. Prepare. I pressed my headphones tighter. Prepare for what? I whispered, before I realized I'd hit transmit. The answer came immediately. Prepare to leave. The words slithered into my ear, heavy, deliberate. I ripped the headset off, shoving it away like it had burned me. But when I looked up at the monitors showing different decks, I saw something worse. Passengers were stopping in the middle of their walks. Some froze mid-conversation. Others dropped their drinks. Their heads turned upward, eyes unfocused, as if listening to the intercom. My intercom. Only I hadn't said a word. I lunged for the mic, slamming the override switch. My voice boomed across the ship. Desperate. Shaky. Ladies and gentlemen, disregard the last message. Please continue your evening as normal. The passengers blinked, confused, then moved on. The spell broke, for the moment. But as I sat there, sweat dripping down my neck, I realized something terrifying. The system had broadcast without me, and it was only a matter of time before it did it again. That night, as I lay in my bunk, the ship's intercom crackled to life. And the voice that spoke wasn't mine, but it said my full name. The sound of my name jolted me upright in my bunk. Not just my first name, my full name, middle included. The intercom crackled above my head, whispering it in that same slow, waterlogged cadence. I scrambled up, heart slamming in my chest. The ship was silent otherwise. My cabin mate snored across the room, undisturbed. No alarm. No one else had heard it. Just me. Stop it, I whispered, more to myself than to the voice. The speaker hissed, static swelling until it buzzed in my teeth. Then, Deck 3. The words dropped like lead. I wanted to ignore it, bury my head under the pillow, pretend it wasn't happening. But something tugged at me, a pull I couldn't explain. Against every shred of sense, I dressed and slipped into the hall. The ship at night feels wrong. Corridors empty, lights dimmed, engines groaning through the walls. Each step echoed too loud. I made my way down to Deck 3, the crew-only section, pulse roaring in my ears. The intercom hissed again as I stepped into the corridor. Room 19. I stopped cold. My throat tightened. Room 19 was storage. An old supply room no one used anymore. Dust, rusted tools, crates stacked to the ceiling. I'd walked past it 100 times, never thought twice. But now the door stood open. The smell hit me first. Damp, briny, like seaweed rotting in the sun. I swallowed hard, flicked on my flashlight, and stepped inside. The room was empty, or at least, it should have been. Water streaked the walls. Salt crystals crusted the floor, and on the far wall, words had been scrawled in thick black letters, dripping as though freshly painted. The sea wants voices. My stomach lurched. The intercom hissed again, louder now. The speaker in the corner of the room buzzed, sparking faintly. Give us yours. The words rattled through me, heavy and cold. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over a crate. My flashlight beam shook across the room, landing on something I hadn't seen before. A headset, just like mine. Only this one was old, rusted. The ear pads rotted, wires frayed. It lay on the floor, half buried in salt. I bent down, hand trembling, and lifted it. For a second, I swore it pulsed warm against my palm. The intercom roared to life, not just in that room, throughout the entire ship. Dozens of voices now, overlapping, booming from every speaker. Passengers stirred in their cabins, doors opening, faces pale in the hallways as they tilted their heads toward the ceiling, listening. The voices spoke as one. "Come to the sea." Panic erupted. Screams echoed through the halls as passengers stumbled out, confused, terrified. Some covered their ears. Others moved as if sleepwalking, heading for the upper decks. I bolted, shoving through the crowd. My headset still dangled from my hand, buzzing faintly, wires twitching like veins. I reached the comms room, slammed the door shut, and flipped every switch I knew. Overrides, cutoffs, breakers. Nothing worked. The system kept broadcasting, louder, stronger. On the monitors, I saw it. Passengers converging toward the rails, crew standing back and watching with empty smiles. The voice had them, all of them. I leaned over the console, screaming into my mic. "Stop! Ignore it! Stay inside!" My words blasted through the speakers, but they sounded thin, drowned under the flood of other voices. My own system rejected me. And then, through the static, my own voice answered back. Too late. The monitors flickered, and for a split second I saw myself on deck 3, standing in the hallway, headset on, smiling as I whispered into the mic. I stared at the monitor, my heart thundering. There I was, on deck 3, standing in the same dim corridor I'd just left, headset pressed tight to my skull, lips moving in perfect sync with the broadcast. But I was here, in the comms room, watching myself. The me on the screen turned slowly, eyes black, smile stretched. He looked straight into the security camera, straight at me. "Come to the sea," he whispered. The speakers roared with it, flooding the ship. I slammed the power switches down, ripping out wires with my bare hands. Sparks flew, smoke filled the room, but the voices didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder. The ship shuddered. Passengers screamed through the halls as they poured toward the open decks. On the monitors, I saw them climbing the rails, one after another, sliding into the dark water below. No splashes, no resistance, just vanishing into the black. Crew didn't intervene. They stood by the doors, smiling, watching it happen. I knew I couldn't save them. Not all of them, maybe not any of them, but I could fight the voice. Cut it off at the source. The old headset still buzzed in my hand, heavy, warm, like it was alive. I raised it to my ear. The static nearly split my skull. 1,000 voices screamed through at once, begging, laughing, cursing. But beneath it all, one tone pushed through, deep, resonant, commanding. "Give us yours." I don't know why I did it. Maybe desperation, maybe madness. But I pressed the mic to my lips and spoke. "Take mine." The ship went silent. For a heartbeat, I thought it had worked. The speakers cut out. The monitors flickered. The passengers froze on the decks, their eyes clearing as if waking from a dream. Then the pain hit. It ripped through me like lightning, every nerve on fire. My voice tore from my throat, dragged out of me, forced into the headset. I screamed until I couldn't anymore, until my lungs burned and my chest hollowed. When it ended, I collapsed to the floor. The headset lay smoking beside me. The ship was quiet. On the monitors, passengers stumbled back from the rails, dazed and confused, clinging to each other. The crew looked around, disoriented, their smiles gone. The voice was gone. I had silenced it. But something was wrong. When I tried to speak, nothing came. Not a whisper, not a breath. My throat moved, my lips formed words, but there was no sound. I had given my voice to the sea. The Aurora Dawn docked 3 days later. Authorities chalked the chaos up to a communications malfunction that caused panic during the drill. Passengers filed off, shaken but alive. No one remembered the voices. No one remembered the bodies that had gone overboard. But I remembered, and I still hear them, not through the speakers anymore, not in my headset, inside me. At night, When the world is quiet, my chest vibrates with whispers I can't release. The sea speaks through me now. And when I walk past radios, intercoms, even static on a TV, I hear my own voice leaking through. Calling, inviting. Come to the sea. I stopped fighting it. I can't speak anymore, but I can broadcast. The sea has its new voice. And the next time you hear a strange announcement over a ship's intercom, know this. It might be me. If you've ever worked cruise entertainment, you know the ballroom is where the magic and the mess happens. Weddings, anniversaries, corporate events. All the passengers see is glitter and champagne. What they don't see is us, low-level crew, sweating through double shifts, cleaning up broken glass and vomit long after the party ends. That's how I ended up there, past midnight, alone. Everyone else had gone to bed. My job was to vacuum, stack chairs, and polish the dance floor until it shone like a mirror. The ballroom was locked from the inside, so I felt safe. Just me, the hum of the ship's engines, and the faint squeak of my mop. Or so I thought. It started with music. Faint at first, like a radio left on in another room. A slow waltz, strings drifting through the air. I froze, mop in hand. The speakers were off. I knew because I'd shut the system down myself an hour earlier. I tried to laugh it off. Maybe the sound was carrying from the lounge above. Except this wasn't muffled. It was clear, crisp, like the orchestra was right there in the room with me. I turned in a slow circle. The ballroom was empty. Rows of chairs, white tablecloths, silverware gleaming. The polished floor stretched across the space, reflecting the overhead lights. Then came the voices. Soft at first, overlapping whispers. I couldn't make out words, just the cadence, laughter, chatter, the rise and fall of conversation. Like a crowd had gathered, invisible, filling the tables I had just cleared. My chest tightened. "Hello?" I called, my voice too loud in the hollow room. The whispers died instantly. Silence crushed the air, and then, as if on cue, the chandelier above me flickered. Light burst, dimmed, then steadied. But in that flicker, I swear I saw them. Figures, dozens of them, seated at the tables, standing by the bar, dancing on the floor, dressed in gowns and tuxedos, faces pale, eyes hollow, gone in a blink. I stumbled back, heart hammering, mop clattering to the floor. My breath came fast, shallow, fogging in the cold that had crept into the room. The music swelled again, louder, closer, and this time I heard a voice clear as day, cutting through the crowd. A woman's voice, rich and sharp, as if speaking into a microphone. "Would you join us?" I spun toward the stage. The microphone stand was empty. My radio crackled on my belt, startling me so hard I nearly fell. "You done yet?" Collins, the same security guard who always gave me crap for being slow. "Not yet," I said, voice shaking. He chuckled. "Hurry up. Don't want the ghosts keeping you company." I wanted to snap back, but the words died in my throat, because when I turned back to the ballroom floor, the mop wasn't where I'd dropped it. It was standing upright in the middle of the dance floor, and it was moving. Slowly, gracefully, like someone was holding it, guiding it across the polished surface. The wet head smeared streaks of water, trailing in perfect arcs as if following the steps of a dance. The waltz swelled louder, strings trembling, and for the briefest second, I saw a shadow holding the mop, an outline of a tall man in a tuxedo, head bowed as he spun his invisible partner. The mop twirled, then it stopped, and it fell flat with a smack, water spreading across the floor like blood. I told myself I was leaving right then, but when the chandelier above me began to sway, though the ship was perfectly still, I realized the ballroom wasn't done with me yet. I should have walked out the second that mop hit the floor. But instead, I froze, staring at the spreading puddle like it might rearrange itself into an answer. My brain kept reaching for explanations. Air pressure, faulty lights, exhaustion. Anything but the truth I already felt in my bones. The ballroom air pressed down heavier now, thick with the faint smell of old perfume, cigarette smoke, and something else I couldn't place, like mildew trapped in velvet curtains. I tightened my grip on my radio, thumb hovering over the button. But I couldn't bring myself to call for help. What would I even say? The ghosts are dancing? I'd be laughed off the ship. Then came the footsteps. Not mine. Not the hollow echo of my boots. Softer, slower, the shuffle of shoes on polished wood. They came from the far end of the ballroom, where the shadows pooled deepest. I raised my flashlight. The beam cut across the room, trembling in my hand. For a split second, I caught the reflection of something metallic, a cufflink, a button, before the darkness swallowed it again. The music swelled, the waltz filling every corner, and with it came the voices. Clearer this time. Lovely evening. Shall we dance? Another glass? They overlapped, cascading like static until I couldn't pick out one from another. The chandelier flickered again, and in that strobing light, I saw them. Dozens of figures, seated at tables, glasses raised in frozen toasts, faces blurred as if smeared across the air. The music cut. All at once, the whispers stopped, the figures vanished, and the silence roared. My breath came in harsh gasps, sweat prickled my back despite the chill. I took one step toward the door, just one. That's when the microphone on stage crackled. I turned. The stand was no longer empty. A woman stood there, her posture perfect, draped in a gown that shimmered like black water. Her hair was coiled in a style decades out of fashion, and her face was wrong. Too smooth, too pale, her lips painted in a sharp red smile that didn't reach her eyes. She leaned toward the mic. "Would you join us?" she said again, her voice echoing through the room, deep and resonant. I stumbled back. My boot slipped in the mop water, and I nearly fell. My radio buzzed again, Collins's voice breaking the moment. "You good in there? Thought I heard music." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had locked. The woman tilted her head at me, waiting, and then she stepped off the stage. Her heels made no sound on the floor. She glided, not walked, toward me. The closer she came, the colder the air grew, until my breath fogged in the dark. "Don't be rude," she whispered, though her lips barely moved. "We've been waiting so long." I backed toward the exit, my hand fumbling for the handle. But the door wouldn't budge. It felt bolted shut from the outside, though I knew it hadn't been a moment before. She was nearly on me now, her eyes glinting like glass, her smile wider. Behind her, the ballroom filled again. In the flicker of the chandelier, every table was occupied, every chair filled with pale, hollow faces, their heads turned in unison toward me, their glasses raised. To our new guest, they whispered together. The door shuddered in my grip, but it wouldn't open, and as the woman's cold hand brushed mine, I realized they weren't asking me to join them. They were telling me I already had. Her hand was ice, not cold like air conditioning or seawater, but a biting, bone-deep freeze that sank into my skin the moment she touched me. I yanked back, gasping, but it didn't matter. The room had already changed. The tables weren't empty anymore. Every seat was filled with figures in faded gowns and tuxedos, their skin gray and waxy, their eyes glassy and lifeless. They raised their glasses as one, their whispers swelling into a chant I couldn't understand. The woman in the black gown smiled wider, revealing teeth too sharp, too many. "You belong with us now." I stumbled back, my boots squeaking on the wet floor, but the exit was gone. The wall stretched unbroken where the door should have been. Wallpaper smooth and seamless. Panic clawed at my throat. The chandelier above rattled, dust drifting down, and the music swelled again. Only this time, it wasn't a waltz. It was discordant, strings snapping, horns blaring like a funeral dirge. My ears rang, my vision blurred. I dropped to my knees, clutching my head, when suddenly, silence. The woman stood over me, her shadow stretching unnaturally long across the dance floor. She crouched, her face inches from mine. Up close, her skin wasn't smooth at all. It was cracked porcelain, spiderweb fractures spreading from her jaw into her neck. Her eyes were empty sockets, black and bottomless. She whispered one word: "Stay." The room erupted in applause. Hands clapped, glasses shattered, feet stomped against the floor. The dead crowd cheered like they were welcoming me home. My chest tightened, my breath caught, and I felt something pulling me down, like invisible hands dragging me into the polished wood beneath me. I fought it, clawing at the floor, but the ballroom tilted. No, not tilted, shifted. The lights above blurred, the tables stretched and melted, and suddenly I wasn't in the ballroom anymore. I was in water. Freezing, suffocating water filled my lungs as I thrashed in blackness. Shapes swirled around me, figures in gowns and tuxedos, hair floating, mouths wide in silent screams. They reached for me, pulling, dragging me deeper into the abyss. My chest burned, my vision went white. Then, air. I collapsed onto the ballroom floor, coughing seawater, gasping. The figures were gone. The music had stopped. The mop lay abandoned on the floor, my cleaning cart where I'd left it. The chandelier was still, unbroken. It was like nothing had happened. Except my clothes were soaked. My hair dripped seawater onto the polished wood, and when I looked at the walls, the exit door had returned. I stumbled toward it, nearly slipping, my legs shaking so hard I could barely stand. My hand gripped the handle. This time, it turned. The door opened easily, revealing the empty hallway beyond. I staggered out, slammed it shut behind me, and leaned against the wall, heart pounding. For a long moment, I thought I was safe. Then I heard it. A muffled waltz, faint through the door. Laughter, applause. I forced myself to walk away, my body trembling, my mind spinning. I didn't care about finishing my shift. I didn't care about getting in trouble. I just wanted as much distance between me and that ballroom as possible. But here's the twist, the part that keeps me awake even now. The next morning, I reported what happened to my supervisor. I expected laughter, maybe a write-up for slacking. But she didn't laugh. She just gave me a tired look and said, "You should have never gone in there alone." My stomach dropped. "You know?" She nodded once, slow. "We all do. That ballroom was sealed years ago. No events, no parties, no one goes in after midnight." I opened my mouth to argue, to tell her I'd been cleaning it last night. But when she pulled up the duty roster, my name wasn't there. I hadn't been assigned to clean the ballroom at all. I quit after that contract, but the truth still gnaws at me. If I wasn't scheduled to be there, then why did the door open for me? Why did the ballroom wait until I walked inside? Maybe it wasn't an accident. Maybe they were expecting me all along. I wasn't drunk. Let me make that clear. People always assume you've had too much to drink when you say you heard the ocean speak. But I hadn't had a drop that night. I was stone sober when it happened. It was the third evening of a week-long cruise, and the weather was perfect. The air smelled like salt and sunscreen, the decks buzzed with laughter and music, and I couldn't sleep. I'd gone topside for some air, figuring a walk would calm me down. The upper deck was deserted, no music, no chatter, just the creak of the ship and the endless hush of waves. I leaned on the railing, staring at the black water below. It's hypnotic. The ocean at night, endless dark, no horizon, just movement. I felt small, like if I fell in, I'd disappear forever, and maybe that's why I did it, why I leaned over the rail and shouted. "Hello!" My voice echoed into the wind. I laughed at myself. It felt stupid but freeing. Then the ocean answered. Not an echo, not a trick of sound, a voice. Hello? Low, deep, wet, like someone speaking through a throat full of water. I stumbled back, heart hammering. What the hell? The water rippled below, not like waves, but like something massive had moved just beneath the surface. The hairs on my arms stood on end. Curiosity won over fear. I leaned forward again, peering into the black. Who's there? Silence, just the usual crash of water. My breathing slowed, and for a second, I convinced myself it was my imagination. Then, soft but clear. Who's there? The voice mimicked me perfectly. My own voice, thrown back from the waves, only wrong. The rhythm was off, too slow, too heavy. I clutched the railing until my knuckles went white. My throat was dry, but I forced the words out. What do you want? A pause. Then, what do you want? This time the words came with a sound underneath, a wet, dragging inhale, like something rising. The water churned. Foam bubbled against the hull. I staggered back, convinced something was about to break the surface, but nothing came. Instead, the voice called again, louder now, clearer. Come down. I froze. My breath fogged in the night air, though it wasn't cold. My legs twitched forward before I even realized I was moving. I gripped the railing harder, forcing myself still. The waves slammed harder against the ship, spray misting my face, and beneath the surface, just for a moment, I saw it. A face. Not human. Too wide, too pale, eyes like black pits. It smiled up at me, water spilling from its jagged teeth. Come down. My knees buckled. I wanted to scream, but no sound came. My chest tightened, and the world tilted like the ship itself had leaned closer to the sea. I stumbled back, heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. The water went still. The voice fell silent, and for a moment, I thought it was over. Then the deck beneath my feet vibrated. A deep, resonant thud, like a colossal hand had struck the hull from below. And when I looked back over the railing, the pale face was still there, only now it wasn't smiling. It was waiting. I ran. I don't even remember deciding to. My legs just carried me. The empty deck stretched forever. The sound of the waves following close, too close, like the ocean itself was chasing me. When I reached the stairwell, I collapsed against the rail, chest heaving. My pulse thundered in my ears. I told myself I was imagining it. The voice, the face, the vibrations. It had to be exhaustion, the mind playing tricks in the dark. Then the stairwell lights flickered. For a split second, the shadows on the walls weren't mine. They were longer, stretched into shapes that bent wrong, limbs dragging along the floor. I slammed my cabin door behind me, locking it tight. I tried to sleep, but every time I drifted, I heard it again. That voice, low, gurgling, mimicking me. Hello? Who's there? Come down. Morning should have been a relief. Sunshine, laughter, music echoing across the decks. But instead, I noticed the crew whispering, the captain making announcements in a voice too calm, too careful. By lunch, the rumors spread. A passenger had gone missing overnight. Last seen around deck 7, near the railing. My stomach dropped. I wanted to tell someone what I'd heard, what I'd seen. But how could I? The ocean talk to me isn't exactly taken seriously. That evening I avoided the deck. I locked myself in my cabin, curtains drawn. But just past midnight, I heard it again. Not outside, inside. A voice muffled through the walls. My voice. Let me in. I froze. The air in the room felt heavier, damp. The smell of salt water seeped in, sharp enough to sting my nose. My skin prickled with cold. Let me in. The voice came again, closer now, from the bathroom. I crept forward, every muscle shaking. The sound of dripping water echoed from inside. I gripped the handle, telling myself it was just a leak, a broken pipe. I yanked the door open. The bathroom was flooded. Ankle-deep water rippled across the tile. My reflection in the mirror rippled too, warping, distorting, until it wasn't mine. The face staring back was pale, swollen, lips split wide in a jagged grin. Black water streamed from its mouth. "Come down!" The lights went out. I screamed, stumbling back into the cabin. My foot caught the edge of the bed, and I went down hard. The carpet squelched beneath me, soaked. I clawed for the door, yanked it open, and froze. The hallway outside was flooded too. Passengers' doors floated half-submerged, the emergency lights flickering red across the surface of black water. Something moved beneath it. Shapes too big, too fast, circling. The water rose higher, licking at my waist. My breath came in shallow gasps, panic clawing at my throat. I shoved back into my cabin, slammed the door, and curled against the wall, shaking. Then, silence. When the lights came back, the room was dry, the bathroom spotless. No flood, no smell of salt, no warped reflection. I wanted to believe I'd lost my mind, that stress and insomnia had finally broken me. But then came the knock. 3 heavy thuds on my cabin door. I held my breath, praying whoever, or whatever it was, would go away. Then, through the wood, my own voice whispered back to me, "Come down." And when I finally dared to look through the peephole, the face staring back wasn't mine. The face in the peephole smiled at me, my face but wrong, the skin pale and waterlogged, lips cracked, eyes black pits leaking seawater. When it whispered again, "Come down," the glass fogged with salt. I stumbled back, my chest seizing. The door handle rattled, once, twice, before it began to turn. My lock clicked uselessly against the pressure. Something pushed from the other side, heavy, relentless. I shoved my desk chair against the handle, heart slamming against my ribs. For a moment, it held. The rattling stopped. Silence pressed against the cabin walls. Then came the sound beneath me, thud, 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 the hull. Something colossal slamming against it, shaking the ship. Glass rattled in the frames. My cabin lights flickered, then died. And then the water came. It didn't seep or trickle. It burst. From the bathroom drain, from the vents, from the very seams of the walls. Black water surged across the floor, swallowing my bed, my luggage, rising fast around my legs. I screamed, climbed onto the desk, but the water kept rising. And it wasn't just water. Shapes swam beneath the surface. Faces pale and bloated, mouths open in silent cries. Their hands reached up, clawing at my ankles. I kicked, sobbing, but their grip was ice cold, dragging me down inch by inch. The cabin door burst open. Water poured into the hallway, carrying me with it. I slammed into the wall, choking, my lungs burning. But through the torrent, I saw it, my double. Standing in the corridor, perfectly dry, perfectly still, smiling. It lifted a hand, beckoning. I tried to fight the current, to swim back, but the water yanked me forward. My doppelganger's mouth opened wide, too wide, splitting down its cheeks, revealing jagged black teeth. And then it spoke in my voice. "You're mine now." The wave swallowed me. Cold crushed my chest as the ocean dragged me under. My scream filled with salt. My throat burning. I thrashed, clawing upward, but every kick dragged me deeper. The ship's hull loomed above, vanishing into darkness as though it were sinking away from me. Shapes surrounded me, hundreds of them, passengers, crew, all pale, drifting, their mouths moving in the same rhythm. "Come down." Their hands caught me, pulling me into their endless waltz, a spiral of bodies circling in the black. My lungs convulsed, the last air tearing from me in a stream of bubbles. And then I saw it, the face from the water, the thing that had answered me that first night. It rose from the dark, larger than any whale, its body lost in shadow. Its grin stretched impossibly wide, swallowing everything in sight. It opened its mouth, and I was pulled inside. I woke up on the deck. Or at least that's what I thought. Crew surrounded me, voices shouting, hands pressing against my chest. Someone yelled, "We got him back!" But as my vision cleared, I realized the sky above wasn't sky at all. It was water. Endless, rippling, shimmering like sunlight through the surface. And the crew? Their eyes were black, their lips split in two wide smiles. They leaned closer, whispering together in my voice, "Come down." I never left the ocean that night. Maybe my body was pulled from the waves. Maybe it wasn't. But wherever I am now, it isn't land, and it isn't life. I belong to the water, and if you lean over the railing and call out, maybe it'll answer you too. The ocean has its moods, calm, playful, violent. I've sailed through all of them, but nothing prepared me for the storm that wouldn't end. I was a deckhand back then, still young enough to think I was invincible, still dumb enough to laugh when old sailors warned about cursed weather. We were 3 days out from Bermuda when the sky darkened like a curtain dropping over the horizon. One moment it was blue, the next it was iron gray. The first crack of thunder shook the deck. Wind howled so loud I could barely hear the captain shouting orders. We scrambled, tying ropes, battening down anything that could fly loose. Rain came sideways, pelting my skin like glass shards. It was just another storm, I told myself. A bad one, sure, but nothing ships hadn't handled before. But by the second day, the sun still hadn't risen. We all noticed it. Crew, passengers, everyone grew restless. The clocks ticked forward, meals were served, but outside it was still night. Endless lightning flashed across the sky, but it illuminated nothing beyond the railing. No horizon, no stars, just the same rolling black. On the third day, panic set in. Passengers crowded the decks, demanding answers. The captain's voice on the intercom tried to sound calm, but even he was cracking. I kept working, because that's what deckhands do. You keep the ship moving, no matter what. But as I coiled rope and wiped rain from my eyes, I saw something that froze me. The waves weren't just waves anymore. Shapes moved in them. Too tall, too sharp, like spires rising and sinking. I blinked hard, convinced I was delirious from exhaustion. But then one rose higher than the deck, jagged like a tower of black stone before collapsing into spray. That night, if you could call it night, some passengers swore they saw lights on the water, flickering, distant, like lanterns carried across the waves. Others claimed to hear voices calling through the storm, soft and musical. I laughed it off until I heard them myself. I was hauling a rope across the deck when a voice drifted into my ear, clear as if someone stood beside me. "Help us!" I spun, rain blinding me, but no one was there. The nearest crew were 20 feet away, shouting orders I couldn't make out. Another voice followed. A child's this time. "It's so cold." My chest tightened. I staggered to the railing, peering into the black churn below. Lightning split the sky, and in that flash I saw them, faces, dozens of them, pale and wide-eyed, bobbing in the waves. Their mouths opened and closed in silent cries, arms reached upward, vanishing beneath each crash of water. I stumbled back, gasping, clutching my raincoat. When I looked again, the sea was empty, but the voices didn't stop. "Help us. Join us. Stay." I tried to shut them out, to bury myself in the rhythm of work, but they followed me everywhere. In the crash of the waves, in the groan of the ship, even in my own head when I tried to sleep. By the 5th day, none of us were sleeping. The storm never broke, the sun never rose, the world was nothing but black water and lightning, and still the voices called. But it wasn't until I saw one of my crewmates step willingly over the railing, smiling into the storm, that I realized this wasn't weather at all, it was a trap. I'll never forget the look on his face. Luis, one of the older deckhands, a guy who'd worked ships his whole life, just set down his rope mid-storm, straightened his jacket, and walked calmly to the railing. We screamed after him. The wind tore our voices away. He didn't even hesitate. He swung one leg over, then the other, and slipped into the black like he was stepping onto solid ground. No splash. Just gone. The captain locked the decks after that, forbidding passengers outside. But it didn't matter. The voices carried through the walls. You could hear them in the cabins, in the dining hall, even below deck. Soft whispers weaving through the sound of the storm. Stay with us. Don't fight. Forever. By the 6th day, the passengers were cracking. Some clawed at locked doors, begging to get out. Others curled in corners, humming to themselves, their eyes glazed. A few simply vanished, gone from their cabins, their names never spoken again. We tried to keep order, but how do you fight something you can't see? That night, I was sent topside with 2 others to clear debris. Lightning split the sky, and for a moment, I saw it, far out on the water. Not a ship, not an island. A city. Black towers jutting from the waves, windows glowing faint blue, spires stabbing at the storm clouds. It stretched impossibly far, a skyline rising from the ocean itself. The others saw it too. I know because they stopped dead beside me, their mouths open, eyes wide. Then the voices swelled, louder than ever, drowning out thunder. "Come home!" One of the crew bolted for the railing. I tackled him, both of us slamming against the deck. His eyes weren't his anymore. They were black, reflecting the storm. He thrashed and screamed in a voice that wasn't his. "Let me go!" The third guy didn't even fight it. He was already gone, vanished into the dark before I could blink. I dragged the one I'd caught back below deck, but he never recovered. He sat against the bulkhead, rocking, whispering to himself. "Come home. Come home." The storm never eased. The clock said morning, but the sky stayed black. Food supplies dwindled. People whispered about rationing. Some whispered about jumping, claiming the voices promised safety in the water. On the 8th day, the captain called an emergency meeting. His voice shook as he admitted we'd lost our bearings. Navigation equipment spun uselessly. The storm wasn't moving us forward. It wasn't moving at all. We were stuck. That night, lying awake in my bunk, I felt it, the ship tilting, like it was being dragged. My stomach lurched and the air grew colder. I stumbled to the porthole. The city was closer now, clearer. Windows flickering with blue light, shadows moving inside. Towers stretching higher than any skyline I'd ever seen, slick with seawater, impossible. And the voices. They weren't whispers anymore. They were singing, a low, guttural hymn that vibrated in my bones. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was inside me, filling every thought, every heartbeat. The storm roared, lightning cracked, and through the window I saw something rise from between those towers, a shape, colossal, unfathomable. Its head broke the surface, crowned with jagged spines, eyes like glowing abysses. It looked straight at me, and it smiled. I stumbled back from the porthole, but the song didn't stop, and I realized with dawning horror that it wasn't just outside anymore. The entire crew had begun humming along. The sound spread like a sickness. First a hum, low and shaky, slipping from the lips of the man in the bunk below mine. Then another voice. Then another. Within minutes, the whole crew deck vibrated with that guttural hymn. I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. The tune was already inside me. My tongue itched to join in. My chest shook with the rhythm. It took every shred of willpower to bite my lip and keep quiet. I fled. The corridors were worse. Passengers swayed in the halls, their eyes black pools, mouths moving in unison. Mothers held their children close, but the children sang louder, pulling toward the storm. The hymn rattled the very walls, every note timed with the crash of thunder. I staggered topside, rain slamming into my face. The city loomed close now, so close it filled the horizon. Spires stretched into the storm clouds. Bridges arched between them, water cascading down steps that led into the sea itself. Blue lights pulsed from the windows, like the heartbeat of some enormous creature, and at the center of it all rose the thing. Its body was mostly hidden beneath the waves, but what I saw was enough. A head bigger than our ship, eyes glowing blue, unblinking, a mouth that stretched too wide, lined with teeth like stone pillars. It opened, and the hymn thundered louder, rattling the fillings in my teeth, twisting my gut until I dropped to my knees. Crew spilled onto the deck around me. Some climbed the railings, arms spread in worship. Others knelt, singing through cracked throats. One by one they slipped into the water, vanishing into the dark. "Come home!" the voices roared. I staggered to my feet, clutching a rope to steady myself. Lightning flashed, illuminating the deck, and for an instant, I saw the truth. The storm wasn't a storm. The clouds above twisted in a spiral, stretching down like a funnel straight into the ocean city below. The ship wasn't moving forward. It was being pulled down, dragged home. My captain stood at the helm, lips moving to the hymn, eyes blank. He didn't fight. None of them did. I ran, not below deck, not to my bunk. I ran to the lifeboats. My hands shook as I fumbled with the ropes, rain blinding me. Somehow, by sheer panic, I loosed one and dropped it into the churning black. The hymn swelled behind me, voices rising in triumph. Forever, forever, forever. I didn't look back. I climbed down, nearly slipping into the waves, and hurled myself into the lifeboat. The storm's wind caught it instantly, tossing me like a toy, but I held on. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed in chaos. Rain blurred my vision, salt burned my mouth, and the hymn echoed endlessly inside my skull. Then suddenly, silence. The sea calmed. The storm was gone. The sky above was pale gray. The horizon endless again. No city, no voices, no storm, just me. I was found drifting 2 days later by a cargo ship. They said my vessel had never been reported missing. No record of my captain, no record of my crew. According to their logs, there hadn't even been a ship scheduled along that route. I thought I'd escaped, but at night, when I close my eyes, I hear it. That hymn. Low at first, then louder. A rhythm in my chest that isn't my heartbeat. A voice whispering from the deep. Forever, forever, forever. I don't sail anymore. I don't even live near the ocean. But when storms roll in and thunder shakes my walls, I swear I see blue lights flickering in the rain, and I know one day, no matter where I hide, the ocean will come for me again. That's all for this episode, but the nightmares don't end here. Subscribe for daily horror stories, leave a like if you want more, and let me know in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.